Mixing with Mike plugin of the week is the Softube Harmonics plugin. This plugin is a harmonic distortion plugin, no surprise there, but it allows you to work on a variety of levels from very subtle for mastering situations all the way up to severe extremes and offers some very unique controls and settings. So let's dive right into it. We'll start with a basic type because this is where you primarily start from in terms of deciding what type of tone or sound or character that you want to get in. You have solid state components, which emulate the solid state components of the early 70s. You have a transformer setting, which goes back, they qualify it as an American console. It's almost always an API. So it's possible that it's the API 2503 output transformer that they have a distortion modeling of. The master is not qualified at anything other than it is for mastering and mix bus applications. The tube said it's a boutique tube circuit from the 1960s. That could be a variety of things. There were tube consoles like the Red console from Abbey Road Studios, but it could be something. There's so many tube components from that era. It could be almost anything. So it's hard to tell there. And modern is, I think, is pretty easy to pinpoint. It sounds like it's the thermionic culture, the culture vulture, because it has a triode setting, and they basically tell you it's an English all-valve distortion box, so it's probably something along those lines. So as you go through, you can select any of these to get different tonal colorations. Some will give you more odd harmonics or even harmonics. Some will add warming, some will add presence or brightness or edge, and you can kind of go through and figure out how that works on whatever it is you're putting into it, whether it's a mix or an individual sound. Now, let's start up at the top with the meters here, and then I'll go on to the other settings. With the meters here, you have input level, so this will show the audio level coming in. And if you have total harmonic distortion set, it will start at 0, and the amount of distortion, harmonic distortion, will reflect with the meter moving backward. So you'll see it there, so you can have a metering of how much distortion you have. I'm going to leave it there because showing the audio level coming in is not really going to show you a whole lot otherwise. And plus, there's input-output metering on the input-output level controls. So aside from the type, you have two controls that are directly connected. One is a drive control. So this is similar to what you find on the Softube tape plugin, where you basically drive. The more you go up, the more saturation that you're going to get. The less you do, the more subtle the saturation is going to be. It starts at 5. The character is an equalization circuit. So it's a mastering grade equalization circuit that's something, I guess, probably some kind of a tilt filter, because it's pre-distortion. So this is an equalization that's feeding into the overdrive. And if you go clockwise, it will give you more high frequency response, less low frequency response. If you go the other direction, it will give you more low frequency response, less high frequency response. And you have a balanced signal in between. The filter shape is different based on the selection that you have here. So as you toggle through them, you will hear different characteristic tones that come through, partially through the different component distortion that you're getting, and partially through the equalization curve being subtly different. The Dtc Dynamics, this is a unique feature I haven't seen anywhere else. So DTC stands for Dynamic Transient Control. The idea is that as the signal coming in gets analyzed, so we'll analyze it for dynamic range, and when you overdrive the signal coming in, what will happen is it can apply the same dynamics that were at the input to the output signal. So you can apply the distortion and then put some of the dynamic range back in. This is something that would be really great for mastering and mix bus applications, but there may be other uses where you want a heavy distortion, but you don't want to necessarily lose the dynamics of the signal, and it offers a very unique way of controlling that. So as you push it clockwise, you'll get more dynamics, so it'll add more of the original dynamics back in. If you go the other direction, it will do the opposite and will suffocate them more, so you'll get a much more dense, flattened out signal there. And so each one has uses, and I'll show you some different things with the audio examples. So we have all of these features. Again, you could turn this feature on and off. And as we go over to here to the right hand side, what we have is a mix wet-dry control. So we can control the balance of dry and wet signal. Sometimes you want to start, if you're going to do something heavy, then you could put that in and start with the dry and mix that in. The other way to do it is to start with something more subtle or moderately aggressive on the wet side, and then work your way back towards dry to see how much of it blends in. So you have options there. The filters here are high pass, low pass filters. You have 3 different selections that you have available here in terms of the slope of the filter. So we have a high cut filter here that goes from 20 kilohertz down to 200 hertz. And then you have one here on the low cut side, which goes from 10 hertz all the way up to 400 hertz. So you could select the filter slope. This can be applied either pre distortion or post distortion. So this allows you to say focus in the distortion to within a particular frequency range, and then you can mix it in. Sometimes this is very handy if you have a vocal that's sort of hollow in a particular frequency area. You can sort of filter the distortion down to a particular area and overdrive it pretty heavily, mix it in with the wet dry control, and then that can give you a way of kind of filling out an area where there's maybe like a tonal hollowness in a particular frequency zone that you wish you had in the vocal. And again, variety, tons of uses. So let's start just with a stereo mix. So I'm going to start with something here, just so we can hear it in a more subtle way, and then, or a moderate way. I'll drive it a little bit, so just so you can get an idea of what it does and what the different types do, and then we'll get a little bit more heavy-handed with it and have some fun, working with the mix, the wet dry control. All right, so let's start here with just, I'll put in a moderate amount of drive here and just on a mix, and then we'll be able to A/B this in and out. You went your way, and I went mine, tripping slowly down the road, walking a line, and all these cars are passing me by, and all these trees. So one other quick note here, just to talk about, when you listen to things used in this particular way, what you want to really listen for is the depth of field, how much that changes the solidity and focus of the imaging of the individual elements of the mix. So that's kind of in this sort of mastering scenario. But in most cases, when you're doing something, you're trying to get something to solidify or to focus in a particular way, or have a particular hyped kind of energy in a particular way in the mix. And that's the ultimate goal. So if you listen from that perspective, as opposed to just listening to frequency response, which is only a small or a relatively minor component of the overall idea of it, if you get that, that focus and that tonal solidity, then that's what you really want to be listening for. So I'm not going to toggle now through the 5 different types and just kind of keep that in mind. You went your way, and I went mine, tripping slowly down the road, walking a line, and all these cars are passing me by, and all these trees, they seem like a blue, just like a blue. Okay, so I tried to A/B them all in and out. The tube seems to lose a little bit of gain there. I'm not sure if that's a particular characteristic of what they sampled. You can make up for that at the output if you wanted to do an A/B there, but just to kind of give you a general idea of what's going on. Now I wanted to show you a little bit of what happens here if we drive a little bit of the frequency response with the character here. So let's check this out. You went your way, and I went mine, tripping slowly down the road, walking a line, and all these cars are passing me by, and all these trees, they seem like a blue, just like a blue. Running out of time, running So you can see that there, and if I switch it in the other direction, move it towards this, it'll tilt in more body, low end.
You went your way, and I went mine, tripping slowly down the road, walking a line, and all these cars are passing me by.
And if you wanted to bring more body or warmth into something, you could do this, bring the character back a little bit, maybe use something like a transformer, and then mix it in.
You went your way, and I went mine, tripping slowly down the road, walking a line, and all these cars are passing me by, and all these streets, they seem like a blur.
So if you just think, using that on its own will take away all the high frequency response, it will if you use it in an entirely wet situation. So let's take something here where I drive it a little bit more just so we can kind of hear some heavier distortion. And then let's just kind of pick one of these guys right here, and then I'm going to show you what the Dtc Dynamics does.
You went your way, and I went mine, tripping slowly down the road, walking a line, and all these cars are passing me by, and all these streets, they seem like a blur. Just like a blur. Running out of time, running out of reasons, running out of money, don't know what I was thinking. Trying to get away, trying to get back, trying to start again, trying to get back to living. Well, if it's not love, it's not bad. I'm trying to get back the best I ever had.
So this may not be the best example here, but what if I take this basic setting here and apply it to just the drums? So you can see how you can really shape this in with the wet dry control, and just, this is just like a super crush on the sounds. You're getting pretty heavy distortion, especially with the drive all the way up. With some of these, it's just way over the top, like with this. So I could back off the drive here to minimize some of the, even harmonics, which are a little bit edgier. then you could also use the filters here to shape in a little bit of this. So maybe I want to, filter off some of the, put a little warmth here on the top end, or top off this tilt of high frequencies so it doesn't extend too high up. And this, if I set it pre, will shape the distorted signal post or pre-processing, so it'll feed into the distortion. So this would allow me to kind of focus the frequencies in. If I wanted to bring out a particular aspect of something, I can filter the top and the bottom, focus the distortion within a particular area. I can also tilt it one way or the other relative to that positioning, drive it how much I want, select the type, and then work with the dynamics here. So you can see how there's a lot of flexibility with this, from a very subtle usage on a mastering level to using it with individual sounds. I want to show one more thing here, and that is a bass. Now, this is like an 808 bass, and with the 808 bass, one of the classic things that happens on this is that you have this pure low tone, and it doesn't cut through on smaller speakers, so you have to distort it or overdrive it, bring in some harmonic distortion in a way to ripple up harmonically related frequencies that allow it so that it comes through or cuts through when you go to smaller speakers, especially when you get to really small speakers that are like on phones and tablets and stuff like that. And so you can get that to resonate in just enough so that you can hear it on smaller speaker systems. And also it helps to bring up, because of Fletcher Munson, those sub frequencies are going to disappear more rapidly, so you can't count on everybody toting around subwoofers wherever they go. So this can be helpful for that end. So let's just have a listen to this. Let me just kind of kick in a section here where we can hear it. So what I can do here is I can shape, again, the signal going in pre-filter here. So what I have is just a simple setup where, again, I'm driving the noise, with or what they call more control is what they say. So this is actually decreasing the dynamic. This will just kind of give me a heavier kind of distortion. I can vary the amount of that with the drive. I can shape it with the character control. And this is kind of interesting because you would think that if you want more higher frequency response that you would drive more higher frequencies in, but it doesn't really work that way. Because remember, this filter is feeding more low frequency energy into the distortion unit, and therefore it has more to grab onto to create the harmonic rippling that shoots up the spectrum. Now let's go through the different settings here. So you can see how much this, how all of these give you a really unique kind of tone for the type of distortion that would fit. So any one of those different things, when you start to play around with the drive and the character controls, can give you the distortion that you want. You could exaggerate it, use the wet dry control to kind of mix it in. I have a little shaping here post where I'm taking the output of that and just sort of warming up subtly the top end frequencies of the distortion. there you could just hear how all of a sudden that bass becomes, now you can adjust the volume or pull it down, where you might have a tendency to sort of push the volume of it louder so that it's heard in the context of the mix. So there's loads of control here. This is really an amazing box. There's so many harmonic distortion plugins that are out there. They give you usually limited varieties of control. And so some are amazing at certain things. I've always wanted a box that seemed to have all the tonal shaping characteristics that I could use, particularly for mastering, but for all kinds of other things, just like I used here in the mix. And this is really has blown my blown my brain up here in terms of just the sonic possibilities. And you could hear it very clearly just messing around, just with a few sounds going through the different settings, character drive, the DTC Dynamics, which I think is really brilliant, especially the more dynamic stuff. I'm not demonstrating as much of it because it's probably better in a mastering kind of situation where you want to bring in some tonal coloration, but you don't necessarily want to inhibit the dynamics of the mix. Amazing, like really genius idea, whoever thought of that. And incredible plugin, really blown away by it. Couldn't be happier. This is a must-have in my mind. And harmonic distortion is such an important part of making things sound rich and organic and real, or just, overdriven and distorted and completely mad. This is the plugin to do it. So mixing with Mike, plugin of the week, Softube Harmonics.